Hello everybody and welcome back to Unsolved Sundays here on my channel. If you are new here, my name's Caitlin Rhodes and I upload twice a week on a Wednesday and on a Sunday. On Sundays, every other Sunday is a mystery video, some sort of unsolved crime, disappearance, something along those lines. And then every other video on Wednesdays and every other Sundays is some form of beauty, fashion, lifestyle, any type of video basically that I fancy doing. So if you like the sounds of those type of videos, then definitely subscribe and check out my other videos. Also check out all the social media that are on the screen and also my second channel, which I vlog like weekly. I do weekly uni vlogs on there and sometimes I upload a coffee chat whenever I can. That's in the description if you want to check that out, and also any of my outfit links, any details, necklaces, jewellery, everything like that will be in the description, so don't forget to check that out. For today's Unsolved Sunday video, we're going to be talking about the case of Billie-Jo Jenkins and her murder. So without making this intro too long, I will just get started. So Billie-Jo Jenkins was born on the 29th of March 1983, which makes her only 13 at the time she was murdered. So Billie-Jo grew up in East London, but around this time she was 9 years old. Her father was put into prison and her mother said that she couldn't care for Billie-Jo all by herself, so she was placed into foster care. While she was in foster care, she was then adopted or fostered by a couple named, okay, I can't pronounce his name, I'm pretty sure it's Sean. I've looked up a different, couple different pronunciations, but I'm going to pronounce it as Sean in this video. I apologise if I get it wrong, but that is just sort of the easiest way for me to pronounce it. So she was fostered by a couple named Sean and Lois Jenkins. Their surnames, they aren't related, they just had the same surname by pure coincidence, so they're not distant family relatives or anything like that. It was just a pure coincidence. So when she was fostered by the Jenkins, she moved to where they lived, which was in Hastings, East Sussex, and then she went to a school. She attended a new school, obviously, because she moved, by the name of Helenswood, I believe. So that was just a little bit of background. That's just kind of early life of Billie-Jo Jenkins. And then on the 15th of February 1997, Billie-Jo was found on the patio of her foster family's home. She had been painting the back patio doors at the back of the house when she was struck over the head many times with an iron tent peg. Initially, when she was discovered, her foster father Sean Jenkins was the first suspect, despite the fact that all members of her family or her foster family were not in the house at the time. So when Sean was obviously approached by the police to ask what had happened, obviously they just responded to this call, he said that he had been out with his daughters at the time and Billie-Jo was the only one at home, and when they returned, I think it was him and his two other daughters, so when the three of them returned home, he came out the back and found Billie-Jo on the floor. I believe in the official report he said he'd been taking his daughters Annie and Charlotte to go shopping, so I think the three of them were out and they just came home and discovered poor Billie-Jo. So those who supported the fact that they believe he was involved in her murder, it was then supported when later on, when they were investigating and analysing all clothing and things, they found 158 microscopic blood spots on his clothing that he'd been wearing at the time. And also a number of people had come forward and said that in the days just before Billie-Jo's murder, he had been acting quite erratic and a little bit crazy towards Billie. I'm assuming neighbours have just come forward and said that, but yes, a number of people allegedly came forward and supported this. As a result of these particular developments, he was then arrested and convicted of Billie-Jo's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1998, and many people believe that was the end of the investigation of who killed Billie-Jo. There was a process of appeal that asked for a retrial in 1999, but the investigation was then soon after referred back to the original Court of Appeal because they had apparently gathered evidence that had not been included in the initial court trial to suggest that he did not have any involvement in her murder. Another appeal was then put forward in 2004, again asking for a retrial, and it was actually successful this time, and as a result of this retrial that had been called, he was then released on bail. So it was only during this retrial, so the second investigation of Billie-Jo's murder, that it came forward that a bunch of forensic scientists who'd been working on the investigation at the time came forward and said that they believed that the microscopic blood spots found on Sean Jenkins's clothing at the time could actually, or most likely, was a result of where he'd come home and found her and turned her over. It was likely that the microscopic blood spots came from her airways where she was really severely injured. Obviously she was quite brutally brutally injured. So there was a lot of blood, and because it had most likely been part of her airways, head injuries, it happens, it is likely that those microscopic blood spots came from when she was turned over when he found her. There were 40 hours in total of deliberation during this retrial, and after a majority verdict couldn't be reached, Sean was actually formally and openly announced as being not guilty of Billie-Jo's murder, and he was released. They said that no future retrials could be called, and that was it. He was formally acquitted. In 2010, Sean actually requested some form of compensation. He wanted money, basically, for his quite traumatic, obviously, experience of having to go through basically 3 trials and life imprisonment, time in prison, to only then be charged as innocent, to only then be released as being innocent. But his request was denied. So that was a bit weird, I thought, but it's worth mentioning that he tried to ask for money as compensation of all that hassle. I now do have a couple of suspects to talk about. So obviously, because Sean was then found to be completely not guilty and innocent, there's a couple of other suspects and theories that I could find. So the first other suspect that I could find mention of was a man that was spotted just a few streets over around the time of Billie-Jo's murder. He was wearing a tracksuit, and that was his defining feature, and he had a mental illness, and I believe it was quite widely known that he was mentally ill. So witnesses technically came forward and said that they saw this man around the time. He was tracked down and taken in, and they found that because of his mental illness, it was basically virtually impossible to identify if he'd done anything, and to actually charge him with anything. Sean and Lois Jenkins actually went on record at some point in this investigation on a recording saying that they were so afraid of potential break-ins and prowlers because of the area they lived in, so much to the extent that they actually fitted, I think it was window locks and security lights around their house, because they believed that they were at risk, not for any particular reason, just because of the area they lived in, which in itself is a big concern. It said that, you know, it's a red flag that they were already afraid before anything happened. Not of anyone in particular, not because they've anything they've done in the past, just because of where they lived. One of the daughters of Sean and Lois, whose name was Charlotte, also actually later said that she believes that the side gate to the house, so round the side of the house to the back garden, potentially was open when they returned home and found Billie-Jo, but because they hadn't thought anything was wrong, they didn't clock it, and obviously it's only retrospective, but she said that there is quite a high chance that she might have seen that side gate open, which obviously would suggest a potential route for the attacker to enter and leave. So I have something written here that is a theory that potentially links, as some people think, links Billie-Jo's murder to another. So it was the attacks of the man known as the M25 rapist. His name is Antoni Emilia, or Emilia, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm so sorry. So Antoni Emilia is currently serving 7 life sentences for his attacks as the M25 rapist. So if you didn't know, if you're not from the UK, the M25 is a motorway. It's a massive road motorway in the UK, and basically he is serving those 7 life sentences for conducting multiple sex attacks along that M25 motorway. And at the time of Billie-Jo's murder, he actually lived very, very nearby to the Jenkins' family home where she was found. Billie-Jo's aunt in particular really is basically known for openly supporting this link. She believes, or she's gone on record I believe, and said that she believes that there is a link because there is a number of elements within both, well, the investigations of the Antoni Emilia's cases, his attacks, and Billie-Jo's murder, as well as she believes that he in particular fits the profile or the description of a man that Billie-Jo had been describing as stalking her or following her in the months leading up to her attack. So Billie-Jo had apparently gone to some of her friends and expressed concern that a man had been following her. It was a man in a leather jacket that was basically, she'd seen him following around many times. This was provided retrospectively, so when the investigators investigated it or looked into it after her murder, and many of the neighbours of Antoni Emilia, the M25 rapist, many of his neighbours at the time claimed that he was known in the area for wearing a leather jacket. Obviously they then investigated Antoni Emilia further, and it came about that all of his attacks and things, he basically would become infatuated with girls the similar age of Billie-Jo, so it's not unfathomable that she could have potentially been one of his next victims. It's also said that he has a tendency, or he had a tendency, to use improvised weapons during his attacks. So basically what was on hand, he wouldn't bring a specific weapon and use that consistently in all his attacks. He would just use what he could find at the moment. So that would account for the iron tent peg that was used to murder Billie-Jo Jenkins, as I'm assuming, I believe that just came from the garden, or he found it on his way. So that does support that theory. So another similarity found between the case of Billie-Jo Jenkins and one of Antonia Amelia's victims was when they found Billie-Jo Jenkins and obviously did an autopsy, they found a small piece of like bin liner inside one of her nostrils. So this is linked to one of Antonia Amelia's attacks. One of his victims, he suffocated one of his victims in a bin bag. He put a bin bag over the victim's head during the attack, which is absolutely awful. I know, I can't even believe these words coming out of my mouth. But yes, that was another one of the facts that were found to potentially be a similarity to link these two cases. In 2012, Antonia Amelia was declared as guilty for the rape of Sheila Jankowicz, sorry I couldn't pronounce that, in her flat on Christmas Day in 1987 after DNA evidence retrospectively found. Basically, as DNA testing improved further on through the years, they could then find who her rapist was, and it was Antonia Amelia, so he was then sentenced. Obviously he was arrested for this, and the whole M25 rapist thing, I'll try and, if I can remember, I'll try and leave some sources down below on his particular his case and his acts, attacks and awful things he did. He was then coined the M25 rapist after he had been caught trying to kidnap girls and using the M25 as his getaway route. So yeah, like I said, I'll try and leave some sources down below if you want to read a little bit more up about him in particular. So he was obviously already now imprisoned for those cases, and Billie-Jo's case, obviously her attack happened before he was arrested, and like I said, he did live near her house at the time, so it isn't unfathomable. Like I said, he's already in prison. A lot of people are fighting to get Billie-Jo's case reopened because many people obviously are not happy and don't think that this case should just go continued cold because there are so many pieces of evidence to look into. I do think it's absolutely awful that this case is still cold or it's been closed. I do think there's something that should be continued. Like I said, there's all those evidence links or suggested links linking to him, Antonia Amelia. Like I said, many Billie-Jo's family believe that they are linked and believe he should be in prison. Extra, like, sentenced further, even though he is already in prison, but sentenced further for her murder. And yes, that is everything I have to talk about today, Billie-Jo Jenkins' case. So that is everything. Let me know what you guys think. I do have quite strong opinions on this, but I'm always a little bit reluctant to share them on here because obviously I know that no one knows all the full details. So just basing on the details that I could find that I shared in this video, I could be missing some, there could be further, let me know down below. But at this current point, just reading through what I have done there and basically sharing it with you guys, I do think that it does need to be reopened, because if they haven't already investigated these potential links between Antonia Amelia and Billie-Jo Jenkins' attack, I don't see why not, because there seems to be an awful lot of evidence to suggest some link there. What happened to Billie-Jo Jenkins, a poor girl, absolutely awful. She was only 13 at the time of her murder. I think it's absolutely heartbreaking. And her poor family, my heart goes out to all of the families of all of these victims that I talk about in these cases on Unsolved Sundays. So yeah, that's personally just how I feel about the case and how I think it should. I do think it's never too late to reopen a case. Let me know what you guys think down below and if you know any further details. And also let me know down below if there are any other cases you'd like me to discuss in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday for another video. Bye!